right, this is going to be the new look hot take point made 2.0. We're not going to get into all the drama, even though I will say, to be fair, it would be on brand. It is sort of a show about arguing and people getting dramatic and stuff. It's just in this case, I don't think any good comes of it. So all we'll say is this. Kassad elected not to continue on with Hot Take Point Made, but since it was a show I invented, I stocked with people, I actually designed the thing of, I did most of the admin. It's my show. So I decided I would continue the show. And actually, a piece of law I've already revealed, because you will see in the third box, we've obviously got Pimp here, who I do counterpoints with. I mentioned this on counterpoints in the past. What people will not know if they didn't watch counterpoints is the original Hot Take Point Made was actually supposed to be Pimp and Maui. What happened was a few years ago when we got LFN up and running, Monty basically came to Maui and was like, oh, I want you to like make your own show if you have an idea for one. And his show originally, because he was doing events with Pimp, was him and Pimp were going to do some sort of show. But obviously the problem with podcasts is you've got to figure out like what's the hook. Is it just the ours? Is there some like angle? So at the time, I actually suggested, because I heard he was done do it with Pimp, who obviously I've worked with in a long time. I actually thought at the time, I won't make this too long, at the time, I actually thought the biggest problem Pimp had as a broadcast analyst was if he ever played it safe, everyone just went, he's boring, he's just saying boring. But then if he ever dared to give like a hot take, people lost their minds. I will say, he did have what I think is the most mental hot take ever said in the history of Counter-Strike, which was during COVID, when NAVI was still a bit scuffed before they had bit. Pimp did once watch a match where like Simple did some unbelievable like giga carry against like Vitality or Astralis, and then he did have the take on the desk, which admittedly, it's a very hot take. His take was like, do we have to ask the question, is Simple the problem with Navi now? Which is like, holy fuck, oh my God. That's like that meme, like, so at the time, you can imagine people just lost their minds completely. Like they were acting like Pimp said he should be fired or something, you know. So anyway, what I wanted to do was make a show, because there's a quick aside. This is actually a problem that was solved in Korean esports. In Korea, you can imagine, you're really not allowed to be like disrespectful or ever say anything that sort of encroaches on people's, you know, like legacy or your professionalism. So what they did in Korean esports is when they do a big finals, they actually have a segment before that's essentially just a designed trash talk segment where they actually tell the players, you've got to give us something like, you know, for example, this guy you're playing now, you used to be in a team together 10 years, so why don't you say something like, you know, I'll be the one who succeeds from our team and you'll be the one who... So anyway, I thought we'd do a show where basically the idea, it's actually a game show where essentially you try to make hot takes. You're trying to make not only hot takes, you're trying to make them as hot as possible, because the fun is what can stay just within the lines of credulity and reason without being totally mental, but is also like kind of a fun idea, thought experiment. So anyway, point is, we're starting afresh. Pimp's going to be here for now. We're going to see how it goes. And because of actually some of the lessons we've learned from doing this show over the years, because we want to do it regularly and have it be a bit tighter and a bit more professional, we're also going to use a new timer system where when we do a point, this is just to ensure everyone gets all the points in on the episode, we're going to do it so it'll open with someone having 4 minutes. There'll be an actual timer on the screen that we can all see. They don't have to use the 4 minutes, but obviously that's an amount they can use. I would encourage people over time to just learn to make your points last roughly 4 minutes. After the 4 minutes, we'll each get 3 minutes each to respond to that. So we'll essentially do the round table. And at the end, we'll have a 4 minute one where it's just a free for all. Like, right, what do people want to go back and forth on? Are we going to argue more about this, etc.? And then we'll keep going like that through the show. And anyway, the point is, don't worry about all of that. Don't get confused. Don't worry your little head. Just ease into it. It's still Hot Take Point Made. We're obviously going to teach Pimp. By the way, we all had to learn this over the years. It takes a few reps before you get your take spicy enough or they're on brand. By the way, the best ones obviously are the ones where from the title the fan can guess who even gave the take without even watching the episode. That's a classic. So what we're going to do on this one is, obviously Maui's a veteran, so he's going to start us off. So what is the hottest take of this episode, Maui?
I wanted to do this as a show between you and myself so we could have like a more thorough back and forth, but I know that Pimp shares the same opinion as you, so I felt like I would be presenting it to the most willing to engage with audience. So my take.
It's going to be the GOAT team. Get ready.
It is. Why we spoil? We don't need to spoil it. We don't.
No, but we know each other too well, bro.
Yeah. But it's. I will still stand by my opinion that the GOAT team discussion, which I felt like a lot of people moved over to Vitality, is not nearly as closed as many would say it is. I still hold Astralis as the all-time best 5-man roster. And so for I'd say for the tangible reasons, I mean, if you look at just the total, like if you just want to buy the numbers at first, which is obviously the boring way to see it at first, it's 3 majors to 2, so Astralis have 1 more. Vitality do have 1 Grand Slam over them, but if you look at it in total, they both won 14 S-tier lands. So, and on top of that, Astralis actually won a lot of A-tier lands. I didn't put that together because I know people would want to discount that immediately, but they did win a handful more lands than the 14 but those were more so due to the Blast Circuit, the Blast Pro Series types of events. So you could count those in a different way if you don't want to. You could say that they don't matter as much. But there's some aspects that I'd say from the sort of just my criteria for the greatest team that I would actually still hold in higher esteem for Astralis. I think that it is more impressive to actually win a 3rd major off of being in a slump of form or having a team that seemingly passed you in the Grand Slam winning Liquid, and then to beat them at the most important major or the most important tournament of the season, which would of course have been the Berlin major, where they came after the player break and still defeated Liquid. I think that kind of victory itself, it's kind of like teams shouldn't be judged by a single tournament like that, but I would say that in terms of overcoming some type of adversity in their time as a 5-man roster, I wouldn't really say that Vitality overcame anything like that. And also, if I want to even just kind of talk about streaks or how long the period of dominance was, Astralis were the HLTV #1 team for a year and 27 days. That is an extremely long period of time, whereas Vitality's HLTV #1 was 179 days. So it's actually like half the amount of time, roughly. It's actually less than half the amount of time that Astralis that Vitality were the world #1 when they finally got dethroned, which I think was by Furia. Also, on top of that, I find that the way that the skill was spread out across Astralis was a lot more balanced, and I would say that was exemplified by the fact that all 5 of their players got into HLTV's top 20, even Glaive did. During their time as that 5-man lineup, 4 of their players got HLTV MVP awards. That was Dupree, that was Device, that was Glaive, that was Magisk. People might think that obviously Zipnix did, but in fact, his MVP that he had in his career was, I think it was during the Caribbean era of the team, so I wouldn't count it in the 5-man roster's balance. And also on top of this, I think that my final argument is, simply put, Glaive is still a better IGL to me than Apex is. I think that he's just a better overall caller. I think he proved more with his mid-rounding ability. I would say that Apex has shown how to use such incredible pieces to work in tandem, but if I'm really like trying to do like a greater narrative, almost caricature of the IGLs, I'm not really thinking of what was that hallmark Apex round 23, round 24 call that got Vitality over the line. They don't really need it because it usually just was like ZywOo got a clutch, or like Rops got a clutch. Like he did. Don't get me wrong. Apex is a fantastic in-game leader, but I think Glaive is the GOAT in IGL still, and that's why I would still hold Astralis as a whole as the GOAT 5-man roster. That version of him.
Okay. So, just so again, people understand, what we'll now do is Pimp will do his response. He'll have 3 minutes. You don't have to use it all, but if you want to, you can. So go ahead if you're ready.
Sure, I'm down. I think the only thing I agree with in that whole thing is that Glaive is still, at least by me, considered a better in-game leader than Apex. I think one major point that speaks against it for Astralis, for me at least, is that it's also a different era of Counter-Strike. And that era where Astralis were the #1 team for however many days that you just described was also an era where we had tournaments being on top of each other. So you had the likes of NAVI and Astralis going to different tournaments. You had all the top teams spread out, whereas the streak of Vitality and them winning all the tournaments in a row and them being the best team in the world, that's in an era where no teams are spread out, where there's never a tournament on top of each other, where there's never a scenario where Astralis goes to one tournament, Navi goes to another, and a third team goes to a third tournament, which was quite often the case back in 2018, 2019, basically before COVID, something that completely died out after COVID with all the partnership tournaments coming in. For me, that's one thing, the circumstances of how, quote unquote, easy it was for Astralis to win some of those tournaments in terms of the competitiveness of it, I don't think stands a chance against Vitality. I think the only argument I can make for why Astralis maybe is still in the conversation for me is that I find it, personally, I find it a little bit more impressive that you can be the best team in the world when you don't have a clear-cut superstar. And that's by the stretch of the imagination that Device is not a superstar in Counter-Strike, whereas I think ZywOo is the superstar of Vitality, and he has saved their ass quite a lot of times, in that regard. And I think if you were to to put that case up, and make that the cornerstone of your argument, then sure, then it comes down to personal taste, whether you value team play more, and whether you value the fact that Astralis were the front runners on, designating roles and having Sipnix as a supportive element clutcher, having all the players in the right roles, sort of like what Vitality is doing right now as well. So I don't know. I feel like me and Duncan, we had the discussion in Counterpoints a couple of times as well. I think when you look at the quality of the tournaments that Vitality were winning, when you look at the fact that they deliberately, for the vast majority of the time, they didn't attend the PTLs, they didn't attend some of the smaller tournaments, they didn't attend any of the farmer tournaments whatsoever, which they could have done in that period and would have won without a doubt, with the form and the streak they were in. And then again, if you want to compare, tournament wins and tier 1 wins, etc., I think Vitality could have won an awful lot more if they wanted to, but they were being smart about their schedule. They were being smart about, basically how they constructed their calendar and to some degree, maybe even inspired by Astralis, because that's another thing people fail to realize, that a lot of the DNA in Vitality comes from Astralis.
Yeah.
Sonic came in as a coach, you had Lars Ruppel came in from Astralis as well. They worked as a team. You brought in Dupree, so where it all began for Vitality, where they won the first major in Paris, a lot of the DNA in Vitality, a lot of the ways they think about Counter-Strike comes from Astralis as well. So to some degree, you can also make the case that Astralis inspired this Vitality, and they have a bit of a stakeholder in that as well. But I think if you bring the two teams up against each other, I'd any day right now pick Vitality over Astralis.
Okay, right. Okay, cue me up. I'm ready. So I will say, obviously, I disagree with this. By the way, I think it's a good hot take, because what people won't realise is, in theory, Maui's doing it more. Like, look, I'll make his spicy. He just does have Astralis as the greatest team ever, and he thinks there's obviously a decent enough gap for it to be a hot take, right? It doesn't need to be that they're in a contention. I don't think people admit they're the two contenders. The big problem I have is this. I do think it's a hot take, because I do think modern day fans, and let's be real, 2018 was like 8 years ago now, most modern day fans didn't watch Astralis back then, mate. They're going off something they remember, or a HLTV article they read, or a highlight video, or a meme, So since they didn't watch it, understandably, if all they saw was Vitality, it's actually the same reason why Zoomers think LeBron's the GOAT. They hadn't seen the other players. They didn't even see Kobe at this point in time, man. That was like 13 years ago that he got injured. Like, so there's no way they've seen the non-play. So on that one, it is a hot take, the idea Astralis is the greatest team of all time still, especially because, even though I'm not a fan of this argument, a lot of people always like to claim whoever's around now is better. By the way, in part because the game develops and sports died, but also, let's be real, you sort of pointed out there too, Pimp. Also, there's the factor that you couldn't have this Vitality if you didn't have Astralis before, because clearly they developed things from what they saw Astralis do, and some of them probably even playing Astralis, and that was what evolved Counter-Strike. My issue with that is, I just don't think that makes you better, even though I know it's actually a bias a lot of people have, that whoever invents something is sort of above the person who copies it. To me, it's like, yeah, but I didn't just copy it. In this case, didn't I like do some of it to a higher level? So I would even say that part, like, if you actually look last year especially, I do think they were doing some things in Vitality tactically that were like ahead of everyone in the world. But this is like 8 years after Astralis' peak. So in theory, everyone's had time to learn those things. Everyone's had time to get those basics down. And I think certain things you just can't execute at a high enough level unless you're like Vitality, probably the best team ever. So what's funny is, I actually think what makes this debate a great one is almost every point, the other side of that point goes to the other team. So I'll give you an example. It's totally true that one thing that makes Astralis all-time great is they don't have, in my opinion, like, I know people put Device in the category of like greatest player of all time. I always point out, I only know about 3 people who actually think he is, though. So, like, how close is that debate? I know a lot more people who think ZywOo is, and loads more people who think Simple is, and some people who think Donk is. In fact, I know more people who think Donk is the GOAT than think Device is. In fact, Device is also. So if you want to say they didn't have like a GOAT player, yeah, that's true. But also, you could argue they have the GOAT IGL by that logic. I would say the other way around. I think you have a GOAT player on Vitality, but GOAT players very rarely have the best team ever. I actually don't think Apex is the GOAT IGL, so I don't think that's actually a positive for Vitality. I think it shows that Vitality doesn't just do it through the system, etc. Also, I think the Astralis has an excellent floor, maybe the best ever. I think you have to play 10 out of 10 to beat them. I have seen teams play 10 out of 10 and still lose to Vitality. I think Vitality has the highest ceiling of any team I've ever seen in my entire life. Also, I actually think that Astralis, I don't think they're boring, but I can see why to fans they were because of how systemically they played the game. I think there's a lot more sort of art in how Vitality plays the game. I don't think they really have like a set call for Rops to do some of those moves. I think Flames just goes off pure intuition on some fucking parkour shit. And then lastly, I'll just make this point really quickly since the timer ran out. People always love to tell me that Vitality didn't beat anyone good. I'll just do a really quick, like 10-second version of who Astralis beat. Liquid that had no AWPer, so Device just got to farm for free. FaZe Clan who kicked out Carrigan and just used recycled bombs and Nico was the IGL. And then fucking Navi had Edward, who was like a corpse still walking, who was a legend who should have been in the other game. So I disagree with it, obviously. But now we can do the little 4-minute back and forth. So in theory, this is the free-for-all. This is the part where, unlike the rest of the show now, everyone can talk whenever they want. Maybe they can talk over each other. Maybe they can argue. Maybe they can abuse each other. But there'll still be an episode next week. That's the key thing to remember. So where do we want to start? Open it up. Open up the free-for-all. Who wants to go? I assume you have some response, Maui?
Well, it kind of, yeah. I'd say that this kind of factors into a point that I made in the past, that Counter-Strike prize pools have not even scaled with inflation. That I would say the first response that I have is to Pimp, that the level of competition maybe wasn't as good back then. If you're actually talking about an opportunity cost on like an economic level, it should be better. It should literally be better competition back in 2018, because the prize pools for big events were like $1 million, or they were $1 million at the major, which is worth more than the 1.25 today in 2026. So if you actually take inflation into account, the prize pools would have drawn more people to Counter-Strike, and thus the talent would actually be at a higher level, because opportunity cost matters. If you have, no one from America is going to go to like whatever, play ping pong in fucking China or whatever, unless it's their passion, because there's just no money. If there was money, that people would be doing it. People would absolutely be doing it. And that's the same thing, the same type of argument you should be taking for talent in like any sport. Like I think even probably from bicycling or something like that. Like you're not probably getting all of the best possible bicyclists in the world who could be bicyclist talent, because there's just not enough money compared to like, why wouldn't he just play soccer? Why wouldn't he just play baseball? Right. Like you should just play these other sports, because that's how you get the absolute most bang for your buck in terms of putting effort in to actually getting something. So in 2018, in economic theory, the competition should have been higher than it is today, until the major becomes like a $2 million major, which is also why probably Stockholm, that's an aside, but like, it's just, yeah, no, that's one of my big arguments. Is I don't think that the talent has actually scaled on a level that is actually better, and economic theory would even back my point on that.
No, but the point is that I don't disagree with that. The point is that it was spread out at different tournaments at the same time. There were many instances where you had, back then, you had obviously Liquid, Astralis, and NAVI, I think, were the front three teams, to sort of like compete for who were the best in the world. And back then you had Blast and you had Astralis always going to the Blast tournaments, and you had NAVI always going to the Star Series tournaments. There was many occasions where, the teams were split up at two different tournaments that took place at the same time, or at least were as close to each other. So they had to divide and not play against each other, which, as a format thing and as a entertainment thing, I didn't mind it. I like it. I like the fact that you can have, Navi go win one place, and then you have Astralis winning another, and then they face off against each other at the major. But the teams were spread out, So my point is not, necessarily whether or not the game was more competitive back then, or whether or not the money was greater or worse off. Anyway, it was just the fact that it was spread out. There was more opportunities for teams to actually select tournaments for their calendar, depending on where they wanted to be. And I think for that matter, Astralis most likely, and that's always a what-if game, but most likely ended up winning more tournaments, or at least seem more dominating, especially in relation to your point about being number one on HLTV. Navi is not going to overtake Astralis as being the number one team on HLTV ranking if they're not playing the same tournament as Astralis and beating them. They can go to Star Series, they can win that tournament, where most teams would be less ranked than whoever Astralis beats at the Blast tournaments, and all of a sudden that's going to scale into the ranking. So I don't know. I think the competition that Vitality had to endure, the fact that they only played S-tier tournaments for the entire period of dominance, to me is greater than Astralis, who at times, were lucky enough that the teams were spread out.
By the way, I would just say, because it's a point I've also made last year, like the real thing that blew my mind about Vitality last year and this year is they're the only team that doesn't ever take a cynical angle. They never attend an event just because it's a home event like Pimp's talking about, or because it's a lesser prize me. They're not the ones that go, oh, is no one going to Fisher? Fuck it, let's go. They only go to the absolute best ones. So when they win them, and before they took the break, they were always top four. I think that's almost impossible. Again, like I don't think anyone's ever had that strength of schedule in terms of like top tournaments. One thing I would say, because we're running out of time here, is this, Maui, right? Forgetting the whole like reasons why, because I actually think a lot of the dominance things is things like how much do you think they won, or who did they play against? Just on pure feel, do you actually think feel-wise when you watch Astralis on the server, not if they played now, because obviously you can't bring them forwards into, but when you actually watch them, do you actually feel like they're a more dominant team from feel-wise?
Yeah, because every time, except for at EPL in the quarterfinals, they just battered a Liquid team that otherwise was one of the strongest in the world. Okay. And it was just the way that they made Liquid keel over so repeatedly in so many of those matchups was just, it just felt so inevitable. And yeah, I will say and admit that Vitality, and obviously like it's two of the greatest teams ever. So Vitality also in the peak of their dominance had that effect. Some of the comebacks that they pulled off, some of the ways that they won games just felt also similarly impossible.
Sure.
But Astralis also did that too. Like I'm not remiss on the fact that there were multiple tournaments where Astralis did go through hard brackets against hard teams, pull off comebacks, have the great late round calls, outplay them. You know, they slowed the game down to a pace that, like, you know, even, you know, Zeus would try to follow, Nitro would try to follow, like all these other like Falcons teams would try to follow, and then it would just be a trap. And then the way that Astralis comprehensively beat them, it also felt, the way it picked them apart felt so much more methodical in ways than sometimes Vitality's, which to me, eye test wise, is a little bit more about brute force, having the best players, just busting through and just trading at a world-class level.
I'll just say this as the final point, because we've run out of time, and so we'll move on. By the way, don't worry, we'll all get used to over time being more concise and getting the major points in first and picking what to add. And also, everyone here likes to talk lots. We'll all learn to be a bit better. I'll just say as a final point, I actually do think it is underrated that, like, I never ever do that thing that people love to do in esports, which is at the after party, you go up to the loser of the final and you go, well, get him next time. Well, not your fault. I don't do that. Like, what I do is I just talk to him as a human, like, oh, how's your life going and what's going on? The only team ever that has made me go up to people like Blade and go, I actually know you lost and this sucks, but I don't think you even did anything wrong, mate. I think you played about as better as you could have played there. No one could beat them if they play that. That's the only team I've ever done that to, ever. The difference was, I was the guy with Liquid, like, you should beat him next time. What the fuck's going on? Like, look at what you could have done. Like, just study this match. So I'll just say from my perspective, I hold this. Anyway, but obviously, if you like the sound of Hot Take Point Made, we hope we're going to have many future episodes coming. We're going to get the format down, and don't worry, there'll be more spice in the future. We've all got to settle it. You have to get to know each other well enough to then be really horrible to each other. So don't worry, we'll become bitter roommates soon enough. Me and Maui have already got it going, but, you know, at the moment we're being polite to him, because it's like, you know, when someone's cousin comes over and you're like, oh, you can play as well. Do you want to go on fucking the Nintendo 64? Whatever. So the point is, what could they listen to the show on in the future, Maui, to enhance their experience?
Yeah, obviously they, given that we have a new voice here on Hot Take Point Made, I think that it only makes sense to get some new earbuds if they're going to hear this new iteration of the show with the Raycon Essential Open earbuds. These are 20% off if you use our code. This message, of course, is sponsored by Raycon. You can go to www.buyRaycon, that's buyraycon.com/hot take open, get that 20% off. And I've talked about the Essential Open earbuds before. I feel like now you're seeing this in like every big city on the planet. The fact that open earbuds are just kind of taking over because it allows you that true transparency instead of like an in-ear bud, which for some aspects, yeah, I want an in-ear bud, but for a lot of aspects of day-to-day life, the open earbud makes a ton of sense. It feels just healthier. It feels like you don't have that in-ear feeling that's just kind of clogging you up or anything like that. The fact that it's on your ear, you still get good music quality. You can still kind of stim. That's what the Zoomers obviously want to do. They want to stim a little bit, just have that one earbud in as they're doing other shit. But like you got to hear some things in real life. All right. You actually have to hear if, there's a car driving by, if there's a bicyclist that's like, hitting his bell or anything like that. There's so many reasons that you would want to hear what's going on around you as you're walking around. So the Essential Open earbuds are just perfect for that. Also, if you're one of those people that got bored of nature, it's too nice just hearing the wind through the trees or the birds outside, that you want to hear a little bit of music to accentuate it. Yeah, I've been listening to a lot of King Crimson lately, and these are just perfect to just kind of like vibe out that, vibe out and just get that full atmospheric effect that I think they would have wanted.
Okay. I see. By the way, I noticed Maui really wants this new show to work. He's referencing bicycles as much as possible. And I'm actually a big fan of 70s prog rock. So, okay, I see what he's doing. He's being welcoming to the new people on the show. Okay. Right, we'll move on now. So now we're going to do a fan take. That's right. If you subscribe to LFM Premium, it costs $9 a month, or you can just get the whole year for $90, which is about $7.50 a month. You will get all the shows ad-free, and you get all sorts of exclusive stuff. Like at the end of this one, we will, behind the paywall, do a Q&A with Pimp from your questions. So You can submit questions for that. Go to the Discord, put hot take point made in your question. But you can also, we'll have one fan take every episode, assuming there is a bank of hot takes. So far, there's quite a lot. And don't worry, we'll sometimes go into the past to grab some of them too, if they're still relevant. So go to if you subscribe, go and put in your hot take for what you want it to be. It's got its own separate section. This is the one for this episode. It is by Sen Moki, and it is, listen to this. I know how to pick them, boys. Vitality will win both tournaments with JL and start another season of dominance after he leaves. He lets them go into both tournaments with less pressure and a team play style that other teams will find hard to predict, since it's effectively a different 5-man squad each time. Afterwards, the team will be all together again, reinvigorated from their time apart and extra motivated to start the conversation of best team to ever play the game again. They may lose a couple of tournaments on the way, but will win the Singapore Major to take the best team title from Astralis. Okay, so he's even inadvertently segued into this. So obviously that one didn't need 4 minutes, did it? But now we'll just do the responses. So let's have Maui. What's your response to this hot take? That not only are they going to win both events with JL, they're going to win the Major, and it's going to start a new era of dominance. What are your thoughts?
It's cope. It's delusional. It's a Vitality fan that doesn't know that it's all over. It's ending. You're losing to bait at this point. Nah, this is not the same Vitality anymore. I do think that but the thing is, Vitality already took their mental reset. Why do they need another one? Okay, they took their week in America with guys going to, what was it, Yosemite and New York, like that was supposed to be the mental reset for them. If they're not coming back after that, losing the Major and the player break to show some form, which they didn't so far, even at EWC, then I'm not really seeing that this is going to be some second honeymoon or anything. So no, I'm still sticking with what I said at the beginning of this season. I think Falcons are going to have the season. This second half season is going to be theirs.
I'll go then, Pimp.
Yeah. I think I'm on the same train as that. I will say though that I think it's I don't think it's impossible for them to win one of the tournaments with JL, to be completely honest. And to me, it comes down to whether or not Falcons is going to be the team that I hope they're going to be. I want Falcons as you, Maui. I want them to be good enough to be able to consistently, fight for the trophies and punish a Vitality that is playing with a stand-in. But I see a world where they're not, I see a world where Falcons are still a little bit too inconsistent, where Kerrigan isn't fixing his fracking, even though a lot of people think that's not an issue, but that will be an issue against pretty much any team out there and against any tournament if it continues to be like this. And I see a world where maybe Falcons are not as good as I hope they will be and as I think they will be. And if that's the case, then sure, Vitality could go far in one of those tournaments, because I don't really see the likes of, let's say, G2, or maybe even NAVI to some degree. I'm not sure NAVI is consistently going to beat Vitality with JL on the lineup. And at that point, I only have Falcons left and maybe Spirit if they figure it out and start to play well, who I think consistently will beat Vitality with JL on the lineup. So as much as it's a hot take and as much as it is coping, because I don't think it's going to happen, then I wouldn't be surprised if it's closer than people think. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not as clear and obvious as people think. I also will say, now I've heard you say it, Maui, that Vitality, it's over. I've heard some of my colleagues on the desk say that the Vitality thing is over. Can we just calm the fuck down, because they lost one game against Bait in a best of 3, where, by the way, if you were watching the game, they were up, I believe, was it 10-9 on it?
0, yeah.
They could have won easily 2-0. Yeah. They were up 10-9. I'll tell you exactly what happened. They're up 10-9, T-side on Inferno. Apex calls them in towards the B bomb side. They get the 2 opening kills. They have a 4v3, and Apex, for whatever fucking reason, decides to jump on top of Newbox, dies to a guy in CT spawn, and then they lose the retake scenario. They would have won that round. It would have been 11-9. Bait would have had an eco. It would have been 12-9. Vitality would have won that game 2-0. And none of the conversations you're having right now with them being over, them playing well, like you just discredit the whole Blast Online loss as well, like you've done with every other team. But I feel like we're treating Vitality differently because they were as good as they are. So, calm the fuck down. Say it in, let's say, 5 days, 6 days from now on, when they won EWC, which I think they will. And I'm pretty goddamn sure Vitality will still be up there, and still be considered the best team in the world. Furthermore, the people are like, oh, they're only top 5 VS, they're not even top 3 anyway. Shut the fuck up. That's some of the dumbest shit I've ever heard, and the quickest, recency bias response I've ever seen on a team. I am not worried whatsoever on behalf of Vitality. I also do think that once they come back with the full roster for the Major in Singapore, if I were to pick one team who's going to win that tournament, it'll be Vitality right now, even above Falcons.
I'll just say this. When I see that thing of like, they're not even top ranked anymore. You know what? Let me see. You prove it to me then, guys. You know that I do betting. I want to see those Vitality odds pumped all the way up, brother. I want to see some 1.7s for some BO. I'll never get it. It's going to be 1.4, 1.38 like it always is, which implies they're a heavy favourite and everyone in the world's picking them to win the series. So I think a lot of it is doomerism personally. Like, I hate this take, by the way. Like, what's funny is his take is like, it's a mixture of a fanfic and like just bad analysis. Like, I'll tell you the terrible analysis. So he starts out with they'll win both the tournaments that they have gel. One of them's going to be without Apex, for fuck's sake. I don't care any level of cope of like, but Messi has technically IGL'd. Oh, maybe we're developing Flames to be elite. Yeah, that's not going to work in the first tournament, mate. Like, and this isn't a real, they're the IGL. It's, you do it for one tournament. Like, if you want Messi to be the IGL, I'd still say give him a few tournaments in a few months to like settle in. He has to just do it for one tournament. Even he knows it's not real. He's not committing to a long-term project. He's just essentially pug calling the strat book that they already have. I think that makes it way less likely you can do like mid-round switch ups, some like radical change in the game. You're just going to call a basic game and hope you hit your shots. He's right about the less pressure, but I don't think that really affects whether they win or not. If anything, I think Vitality's amazing at winning with pressure. So the only one, like, first of all, the one where they have Messi, presumably IGL and Apex, there's no way, I think that's passport. There's no way they're winning that one. Like, forget about that one, unless ZywOo has like a 1.5 rating or something absurd. Maybe the one where Messi has to step out and Apex is still there. Maybe even then, like, I would pick, they could maybe win that if they fuck around. Even then, I think people underrate all the dirty work Messi has to do in the squad to allow the others to be a star, to allow ZywOo to have a million good guns. There's a reason why Messi mains a fucking Galil half the time on the T side, etc. So you won't have any of that, by the way. JL's going to want a garden. He's going to want to be in clutches. He's going to want to take resources. And then also, it ends with like that they're going to win the major. Look, I do think they should still be the best team. So I guess in theory, I have them still winning the major, but it won't be because of anything to do with gel. That part's so weird of like, it's going to reinvigorate them and all that. By the way, I'm with Pimp as well. I think, pretty sure I'll say right now, I think they win EWC. The actual bait loss reminds me so much of in the first season of last year, when anytime they ever lost in the group stage, people went, what the fuck, it's over. And then they would just come back and win. And whenever they win, every motherfucker, the same one going, it's over, would then go, nah, it's kind of boring the way they just win the playoffs. There's no competition or anything. It's like, which is it? Which is it? Are they fucking over or are they just winning complete? So the way I agree with Pimp. The key that there for why I didn't overreact to that result is they could have won it 2-0, boys. That's just a rare example of they didn't close the game. And it was a minnow that they're not expecting to beat you, etc. Also, I actually agree with what Pimp said there, which is this. Everyone wants to tell me stuff like, because of how Vitality did, that means that Falcons is the best now. Falcons also got their shit rocked in that online blast qualifier. Why is that allowed? Why are they allowed to get their head smashed in? But Vitality's result counts. Like, which is it? Do they count or don't they? Personally, I don't care about any of those online results. I'll wait until these playoff matches now for all these teams to have a sense of who they are for this season. So, in a weird sense, I do think Vitality been won. I just think this is nonsense. Like, he just wrote like a fucking anime of why they would do it there. And somehow jails like the fucking inspiration. If anything, you could have made the point better, mate. If you'd have made it like it'd be so annoying to play with GL, it'd remind them how great the rest of the squad was, and it'd be like, oh, it's awesome, have you back, Messi? You too, Apex. Let's win, bro. That angle's not bad. I don't hate his idea that they'll be better than Astralis squad. I think they already are. So whatever. I think that's not a bad one. Like I said, it was definitely a hot take. He delivered on the hot take part there. Yeah, it was vaguely credible, but it was still absolutely mental. Now, let's do a little poly market, actually, because on this topic, let's do the one for who is, because I think it's a perfect time to do it, for who's going to win EWC. So if we put the poly market for this one has been out for something like 8 days so far, so it's had a little bit of time to run. Vitality is the favourite at the moment. They're on 24%. Falcons is second on 18. Spirit is actually third on 16. Mouse has jumped all the way up to 13%. So is Furia, 13%. By the way, remember, for Mouse and Furia, that'll also be because they're on the easy side of the bracket, so people are imagining it's more like they're in the final, which is probably also why I imagine Falcons is 18%, because they have to get through Vitality, probably. Right, Maui, who wins this tournament, and which one of these numbers would you take? In case they're two different questions.
Well, I would just, okay, yeah, two different questions, I guess. So it feels like the value's already been baked into Mau's chance, because I wouldn't have put Mau's at fourth had they not had the easier side of the. I think they're going to make it through that side though. So I would be more likely to take them if it were me putting in on this one. But I think that Falcons is the best team. I liked what I saw more of in the group stage from them. I guess I did look back at the Vitality Dust 2 versus Bait, and that's also what caused me concern. And yeah, they could have. I mean, yeah, they could have won Inferno, but They could have also not gotten owned by Sizzy on Dust.
They did get wrecked.
Okay?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
that did happen. So I'm a little bit worried about them. But Falcons, I mean, I just think it's a really okay. Actually, now I'll even peel back more. I would say the best value is a Navi cheeky run here because they're going to beat Legacy. If they can beat Falcons because I think tactically they might be more well-rounded than Falcons at times. And then it's a bloodbath over there between Vitality and Spirit. And if their record hasn't been super great versus those teams, but they just look vulnerable. And I just think if you're pinning them at the 6th team to win this at 7%, there might be something to be had.
Okay. By the way, just as a general rule, always say I would take this number.
Yeah.
Just
I would take Navi for this percentage, but I think Falcons is the best team if I put a power ranking out.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not a secret that I think Vitality will win the tournament, and 24% of Vitality winning a tournament with their full roster, that's probably the best value you're ever going to get, if things are as we think they are. I will say, though, that in terms of like your cheap pick with Navi, I think it's way more likely, and they may sound outrageous, that G2 wins this tournament than Navi wins it. The odds of Navi walking through that lower bracket and winning those games, beating potential Falcons, getting past Vitality or Spirit, and winning the grand final in a best of 5 scenario, I deem to be less, I guess less likely than G2. G2 have to go through an upper bracket where I think they face Astralis in the opening game. That should be a win. I think G2 overall is a team that is being slept on a little bit. I think it's a solid team. It's a solid squad, and I can definitely see them beat Furia. I can definitely see them beat Aurora. I can see them beat anyone in that upper bracket and make it to the grand final. And then depending on who they get in said grand final, there's always a chance, if it's a one game thing in the grand final. So if you were to go for a cheap pick and you want a low value, at a team
what would you do?
Yeah.
If I was to go for a cheap pick, yes.
If I was to go for a cheap pick, then I'd go for G2 at 5%.
Yeah. Don't worry, I'll keep everyone legit. I'll keep them all on side. I will say this. I also think 24% because of the bracket. I'm taking Vitality. I think they're going to win the event anyway. I actually think those are excellent numbers. In a normal bracket, they'd be more like 40% or something. So normally I wouldn't get that much value. If I'm not going to take Vitality, which I just would on this one, I actually think, yes, because of the bracket, I would have to look at someone on the other side of the bracket. And actually on that one, I'm not willing to give up on Fury yet. I still think if they just get their game together, they have the pieces to do it. Look, the hard part obviously is in the final, much like the major. They're probably going to play someone really good who's come out of a really hard bracket, but I've actually seen at majors before. Sometimes that just means like NAVI at the Copenhagen, you just have to have one good match. Like, if I look at Fury, the other reason I like them as a team is I also feel like they've never completely let the map pool go to shit. It's gone a little bit off, but they've still got a pretty good spread. People like Maus, I still can't believe they won those 3 maps out of 4 Spirit against Bounty. Some of those maps, like them winning Just 2 doesn't even make sense to this day. I still don't know what happened. So, difference is I could vaguely believe Fury. So, if I wanted to get cheeky, I'd do Fury. I think I'll just be boring and take Vitality. I'll also just point out, just to explain how Polymarket works. If you actually look at the volume on Falcons and the fact they're 18%, that is people just picking no against Falcons. They're not picking anyone to win. They're just saying, I do not think Falcons will win. So essentially, you can also just hate view people. Like, this is how some people are using Polymarket. They don't care about who wins. They just care that Falcons doesn't win, which admittedly, that is a different theme and a way to view Counter-Strike in the year of our Lord 2026. Okay. So let us move on. And now what we are going to do is I will just tell everyone that obviously sports season never ends, does it, around the year? So Prize Picks is here as one of our wonderful sponsors. And at Prize Picks, they have all sorts of different sports. So if you want ones that are currently running, you can do things like baseball, not really my cup of tea, but obviously the Americans do like it. You've got women's basketball is actually a big thing now, not just for political reasons. Some people actually are just into it. I will say, by the way, as someone who's an elitist to a basketball, if you do watch some of the people like Caitlin Clark, she just have a pretty good game. She's a good shooter. It's like she definitely takes like a lot of like hero ball shots. So if you like that style of basketball, it's someone to watch there. Obviously, in the future, we've got American football going to start up, normal European soccer, aka football, will be going soon. And Prize Picks is super easy to play. You just pick basically between 2 and 6 of their stats projections. It'll just have all the different players for the matches, and they'll give a projection for each. And all you do is pick the one you like, pick more or less on the number they say. So it could be how many 3-pointers will Caitlin Clark make, how many goals will this striker score, how many, whatever it could be, 3-pointers will someone make in traditional NBA, whatever it might be, how many touchdowns will a quarterback make in American football? All you do is pick more or less. It's really easy. And I think everyone will be able to figure it out. You can also do things like copy your picks of other people who've already succeeded on the site. You can share your picks with friends if you want a social component. And you can just do it all in about 30 seconds, basically. So if you would like to, why not? Download the app today and use code HOTTAKE, all one word, to get $150 instantly in lineups if you win your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use code HOTTAKE to get $150 instantly in lineups if you win your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, America's #1 sports picks app, also available in all 50 states. Okay, I've got an interesting one for you here. We had a debate on past episodes of Hot Take Point Made of like the player of the year, etc. And actually, I'm going to like mirror one of Maui's takes because I think this is a fun one, right? I don't personally actually think Falcons will be better as a team than Vitality. I think the floor of Vitality is crazy. I think they are just the team that I expect to be in almost every semi. I also still think it'll still take a really insane game to beat them. But the hot take is this. I actually do think in this second season, though, it is possible. So I'm going to say it'll happen for the hot take. I'll say that Monacy is a better player than ZywOo in this second season. Now, look, that might still mean ZywOo's like second or third and has insane stats and 1.3 ratings every tournament. But the point is, one of the problems I've always seen with Monacy in the past is people take for granted. It's the same reason I always give Donk extra credit. It's like, look who's fucking like the leadership set up in some of these teams. Look at like this, the balance of team roles, etc. Like, I think in G2, Monacy had a mad scoffed set of players and teammates he worked with and coaching staff and stuff. And even though on paper, yes, Carrigan is a fabulous IGL, I imagine he's going to have a lot of tournaments and matches where he mega low frags to historically low levels, which means if you're Monacy, you actually almost have to go absolutely God mode to have a chance to win tournaments. But here's what's cool. I actually think if you are Monacy in them, one of the reasons why they're all hyped is it just feels possible to win everything now. So I actually think this is going to be the loosest and freest you have ever seen Monacy. I do think one of the reasons he choked wasn't just like proximity to Nico, a little bit of it rubbing off. I think it was also like there's a massive amount of pressure on him in loads of those games. I even think if you've ever watched how they play, they've never been a team that looked like they had a system in any of the teams he's played in to set him up with the AWP. They just look like he just gets to exist like a Godzilla on fucking Tokyo and do whatever he wants. Like, and if he dominates, he dominates. If he doesn't, he doesn't. So I think there's so much on this guy's shoulders, but essentially I think he's finally got the team and the opportunity where he can just play. He can just fucking play for the love of the game. And I think he is so good. But it's one of the things I did in the off season is I've just been watching loads of like fucking frag movies of Monacy and POVs of him. And bro, genuinely, Donk is like the most astonishing player to ever watch, but I actually think Monacy might have the best like aesthetic pleasing eye test I've ever seen of any player. Again, people know the ones I'm fans of, Kenny S, Sim, it's all of that combined in a one. And then on top of it, bro, Simple had an extremely good rifle. Monacy actually could do what ZywOo fans already claim ZywOo does. Monacy could drop the AWP tomorrow and just be a rifle. He'd still be a top 3 player in the world. He is unfucking believable at just all the weapons in the game. He's insanely good. So Maui's take was that like Monacy could be #1. I sort of agree, but I'm going to take the alternate path. It doesn't mean his team will be #1 though. I think he'll just smurf all the tournaments. Like, I actually think this is where he just shines and goes absolutely crazy. And part of it is that I think Carrigan takes care of the rest of the team, and Monacy just gets to be an AWPer and be the best AWPer and just fucking shit on everyone. And also that whole thing of like ZywOo rifles, well, then you're going to be shit all luck, mate, because Monacy ain't going to be. He's going to be on the AWP every time he can get it. He's going to be forcing players. He's going to destroy everyone. So there you go. You can cut my timer already. Monacy will be the #1 player of the second season. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, nah, he won't, unfortunately. Your issue with Monacy, I agree. I think he's aesthetically the most pleasing player to watch. I think he's the most entertaining player to watch, and I'm a massive Monacy fan as well. I also do think the race between, who's going to be the best player in the world is definitely still open for debate, So it's not that it can happen, but my issue with it is, and the reason why I don't think it's going to happen is the fact that what you kind of described, in the old iteration of Falcons was a Monacy who felt he needed to force the game in order for them to win, because they weren't as good as a team. If he didn't play well, Falcons wouldn't win tournaments. Falcons wouldn't go deep into the playoff. And that's where the whole, Carrigan not fracking is going to be an issue for Falcons, because that's going to be the same thing happening right here for Monacy in Falcons if Carrigan is going to continue to be as low fracking as he is right now. At some point, Monacy, right now it's fine, and he's playing fine, but at some point it's going to be one of those scenarios where he's forced to do a little bit extra. He's forced to kind of, do what Kerrigan is not doing as a player. And I think the reason why ZywOo is not feeling that pressure and vitality is that he's surrounded by Flamesy, he's surrounded by Robs, and Messi for that matter as well, that the whole support cast around him is fracking enough for him never to really feel that pressure, even when Apex is having a game. And I also will say Apex have a higher output than Kerrigan to some degree. That speaks into why I think ZywOo is more consistent as well. Like, it's just the fact of the matter is, at least when you look at the past year and a half, he's been more consistently delivering and more consistently performing. And I buy into the argument that, it's way easier to do that on Vitality when you're winning most of your games and you have a system and you're being set up and you're basically being catered to in a lot of different occasions. Whereas m0NESY, he has to create the game himself. But that's also the way m0NESY plays Counter-Strike. He wants to create the round from the beginning by himself. If you watch m0NESY's demos and if you watch ZywOo's demos and you put them up against each other, I'm pretty sure the average early encounter for the two players would be vastly different. ZywOo can do it at times, but he doesn't feel the need to it. So sometimes ZywOo is not involved before we are a minute into the round. Whereas for m0NESY, if he's not involved in the round a minute into it, then something went wrong or he picked the wrong position or the other team basically avoided him for whatever reason. So I think there's basically flaws in how Falcons play Counter-Strike and how m0NESY plays Counter-Strike that's going to make it tough for him to ever find the same amount of consistency as ZywOo, despite that from a talent perspective, from a skill perspective, you can make the case that m0NESY is as good as ZywOo, if not even better. But I really do think the way Falcons play and the way m0NESY is playing, based on the fact that not only in Falcons, he always had to force the game, always had to do it himself. He also came from G2, where he had Snacks as an in-game leader, where he had Huxi as an in-game leader. So it's deeply part of his DNA from the get-go. He became a pro player, that he's always playing with some in-game leader who just can't frag or can't shoot for whatever reason, whether that's Snacks, Huxi, or Kerrigan, right? So it's deeply integrated in his DNA, whereas for ZywOo, I feel like it's been a different case.
Well, this is pretty similar to the one that I made two episodes ago about m0NESY is going to overtake. There's a chance that I think if I remember,
yours is hotter than mine because yours is that he'll actually be real number one on like HLTV at the end of the year, right?
Yeah. So mine is a bit more like but I also kind of made a loophole in that one, which is that he will. I think that there's a great chance m0NESY will be the world #1 player, but that's because HLTV's list values things like MVPs so much.
He needs to win the major, yeah.
And so if they win a similar amount of events as Vitality and they win including the Singapore major, then he just will get the award.
And we assume he'll be MVP if he does that, etc. Yeah.
Yes, I would have to assume that, of course. Yes. The only where I kind of actually take issue with the take that he's actually the best player, though, is that I still would probably put money if I watch ZywOo, m0NESY, and new contender alert Donk just playing. I think Donk's going to still look like the best player. I think Donk actually will look like the best overall player when it comes to Counter-Strike as a whole for the entirety of the year. And I think he might even still be holding that. But sure, like MVP awards won't go his direction because I don't think Spirit are winning almost anything. I think they're going to win a couple, like 1 to 2 tournaments this season. I highly doubt that they're going to actually be winning I don't know what you would consider, the big events of this season, but the ones that have every top team at them, I don't know if Spirit are really going to win more than 2 of those. And I don't think that they're going to win the major either with this iteration of the team. So that's why I think m0NESY is going to be, has a great chance to be the world #1 for 2026. And I think that is due in part to the fact that he will continue this level. Like his group stage level was already insane for this game. I think that his major was obviously really good. He's shown so many times now that he is just, I'd say that his game is just getting slowly refined, whereas ZywOo almost came into tier 1 as this finished product. m0NESY is still on a journey of learning what he needs to do in order to make sure he's not creating losing conditions, that he's not going for the flashy play all the time. He could still hit flashy shots, and he will when he's backed up into a corner, but I don't think that map to map, you always have to see 15 attempts at great shots for that m0NESY used to go for on I'd say almost like a round to round basis. It was kind of crazy watching him on G2 in the beginning, where it was just like, wow, look how fast he flicks, but he misses a lot. Now it's you see the flicks, which are insane, and you see them a little bit less often, and I think that's better. That just shows to me that he has a more well-rounded game.
Well,
if anything,
go on.
yeah, if anything, I can add to that. He's closed the gap. He's closed the gap to Donk and ZywOo, and I think that's probably the biggest credit you can give the man. Right? It was a two horse race last year, and arguably the level of Counter-Strike, the duel between ZywOo and Donk were probably greater than the duel between ZywOo and Simple. I think the average level of Counter-Strike between those two is probably higher. The new ZywOo, or the version of ZywOo we got in the last 2 years, was better than the ZywOo the first couple of years, and I think Donk is playing on par, if not better than Simple, in terms of how good he is as an individual. So the fact that m0NESY have closed the gap to those two who are in time, going to be considered the two best Counter-Strike players of all time, I think that's massive, But there's I feel like for me at least, it one thing is closing the gap, another one is overtaking, and that would be a huge leap for m0NESY to do that. And then, as you said, Maui, it entirely depends on what the premise of the discussion is, because yes, HLTV #1 player, that's different, at least in my book, from who I think is the best playing player, and that has to be said, So it depends on which one of the two we're going with.
I'll give you 2 reasons why I think it'll happen. Because one, I actually think a really underestimated part of people's careers is what I've been thinking of in the off-season now that they've finally won the major and NiKo got over the hump and all that jazz. Because that counts for m0NESY too. He also had many years. 2024, he was unbelievable, but they didn't win the major, did they? Twice they fucked it up, even though they looked like they had the bracket to do it. So I think also one thing people take for granted is, because I think you saw this with both Device and ZywOo himself, which is once you've actually won all the big prestige events, which they've done now. Remember, they won Canavate St. Cologne back in CSGO, and they've now won the major, m0NESY and NiKo. Once you've won all the rest, it's not that they become easier, but there's not the same kind of pressure because you've won them. Like, I actually think, don't you think ZywOo in CS2, it's one of the reasons he's been so free, bro. As soon as he got this amazing team, he just wins tournaments for fun. It doesn't look like there's any pressure on me, even though he's playing some of the best CS. And then also, I'll tell you a subtle reason, and it happened at this major. Remember, at this major, the best rated player in the playoffs was Keisuke. In the semis and the quarters, NiKo was like, I think it was the semis and the final, NiKo was unbelievable. The reason why they are not going to win the MVPs and m0NESY will win them all is the reason why, despite all this conversation about the role of the AWP, etc., when the AWP dominates, it's just so much cleaner. Like, you just don't die, you don't take damage, you just kill the guy instantly. I was even thinking when I was watching some of these m0NESY frag movies, it's why actually I think Donk probably will be the best player ever, because I don't think he even has the advantage. Like, remember, m0NESY does the simple thing where it looks like you're hacking and you look to your right, you instantly, like a Terminator, lock on the guy, fire the gun without any scope coming, and he just dies on your screen, then you turn back to the next fight, right? In theory, that's like the ultimate counter to people like Donk. You just kill them instantly with one bullet. He has to actually shoot you in the head, line it up, do fucking movement, alter. So I also think, actually, if you are Falcons and you get to the final and these players carry, if you're NiKo or Keisuke, mate, you can play the best game of your life. You're not winning the MVP, bro. The MVP every time is going to go to m0NESY, and he's going to have those stats that all the fucking HLTV guys love, the AWP, KPR on all the maps won, etc. And I think that's actually one area where the AWP still is the king weapon, in my opinion. It's why, actually, if people don't know, why ZywOo wins if he ever has a close percentage to any of his teammates. Is very rare they actually do get to steal an MVP. So I also think he'll be a freer m0NESY than you've ever been before, and essentially, if his team ever does well, he'll just get all the credit for it. All right, there's no debate. Right, we'll move on. There's one more poly market, and that is, this one's in line with what we're talking about here, boys. It's just who's the MVP of EWC. So this one's been out itself like almost a week. The numbers are obviously crazy because not many people have bought into this market. The traders haven't really done it yet. So I would say forget the numbers for right now, because obviously, like, as it goes, this will change during the tournament. I assume now the playoffs have begun, people will get interested. I just want to know from you guys, who is your MVP for this tournament? Like, Maui, if you have Falcons win it, so is it going to be a m0NESY MVP? Is Keisuke going to have it? Who's going to win this MVP?
Yep, I'm taking m0NESY to win it. Already has the best group stage stats, and it's just gonna keep ramping up. No, he's not gonna ramp up. He's hit the ceiling, but he's gonna continue. He's gonna continue on that level. Yeah, I got m0NESY.
Yeah, no surprise. I got ZywOo. I think Vitality is going to win the tournament, and if anything, ZywOo in that last game against LinVision, albeit that maybe and may have been the worst team to even be at the tournament. He was farming them. GG to be completely honest, I don't know how LinVision beat TyLoo, but that makes TyLoo arguably the worst team at the time. I don't even know. I'm so done with LinVision, but that's for another show and another talk. ZywOo, I think he had a 2.05 rating against LinVision, so he kind of farmed in that game, and he's going to go into that playoff and he's going to ream everyone, and make sure that Vitality is going to win. So, my money's on ZywOo.
I think it's actually perfect that in the theme of this discussion on this episode, we've basically been doing Falcons versus Vitality and Mauisnake versus ZywOo, because there's actually a reason both of them share why I'm actually very sure one of those two will win. So since I think Vitality will win the event, I'll take ZywOo, and here's why. Because actually, since they both have the stacked side of the bracket, it also makes it extremely likely that if they win the tournament, when HLTV and other people go and look at the maps you won, they're going to be against better opposition. And I do think they do weight it heavily towards the level of opposition you play and where it is in the tournament. So if they play each other in the semi-finals, that match probably decides who wins the MVP. And so actually, even though I said I think ZywOo and Mauisnake can be better, as of right now, it's still quite safe. I also think ZywOo has an unbelievable flaw to his game that maybe no one can match. Him and Donk probably ahead of everyone in history for that. Like I think even Mauisnake and Simple look more up and down. ZywOo and Donk, it's very rare they have a bad game. So I'll take ZywOo to win this one. I think that's easy enough for me. Okay.
Yeah, coming into the show, you kind of gave me a quick briefing as how to present the take and spice it up a little bit. So I'm going to do exactly that, Duncan. And I'm going to start off by the headline and say that we don't need less best of ones game. We need more best of one games.
God.
I am.
Fair enough. You should have led with this one. Okay, go on.
I am, and it goes deeper than this, I wouldn't mind if we got more or the same amount of best of one games at LAN as we're having right now. And it goes deeper than that. I am sick and fucking dead tired of the constant moaning, complaining about format in Counter-Strike 24/7. Whenever there's a tournament or whenever there's one small thing that could be slightly better, take EWC for an example, Duncan. You pointed out in Counterpoints as well that you weren't satisfied with the fact that it was a best of one opening game into best of threes, and that kind of took a bit away from you for the tournament. It's not that I'm saying that I don't want best of threes. I also think a best of three game is better than a best of one game, but I'm not willing to pay the price for it every single time. I think there's more to it, and it goes into two different directions. One is the constant, for me, complaining about the formats that we have, about best of ones, about best of threes, about seeding, about non-seeding, etc., etc. If you watch any other sport out there, whether that is football, fucking handball, curling, you name it, like we have the best and most, I guess, refined formats in any competitive sports out there. Take tennis as a fucking example. If you're a new player in tennis, every single tournament gets seeded. And if you're seed 64 in a tournament, you go into Wimbledon, well, odds are in order to move further from round one or round two, you have to beat one of the best tennis players in the world. And until you do that, your ranking will always be low and you will always get the worst seeded matchup in a single elimination bracket every single time. Football, we just had the World Cup. Football and the World Cup is the biggest sporting event ever. It's the biggest sport, whether you are from America or whether you're from somewhere else, I don't even care. India, cricket, you name it. Football is the biggest sport in the world. And that format has groups. And in those groups, you have third place. You have best third places moving further into the playoff. Teamed by who has the better goal on average, or the more points, obviously, but also the less goals against you or the most goals scored. But you're only playing 3 teams in a group of 4, where there's, 16 different groups, at this point, or 14 different groups, or 12 different groups. So it's basically a randomized, maybe you get lucky that you're one of the best third place deciders, right? So we're talking some of the biggest sports in the world have some of the worst formats ever. In Counter-Strike, we have the most refined, the best formats, and every single tournament at this point are doing it differently. So we're also spoiled by the fact that we have different formats that makes it exciting for different reasons. But they're all great. They're all better than whatever you see in real sports, where real money is at play, to be completely honest. Second of all, the angle with best of one for me is that I think you need to deserve to play the best of the. I love the way we're doing it with the major now. In opening stages at the major, stage 1, stage 2, it's best of one. To be completely honest, there's a lot of moaning and a lot of, criticizing about the quality of the teams in stage 1. And, is that really the major? Is it just, is it the Arma or whatever that be? Okay, fair enough. If you're good enough to make it to stage 3, then you get your carrot. You get to play best of 3 from the get-go, right? The best of the best teams in the world get to play best of 3. The rest, they have to earn that right. Furthermore, I think for best of ones and why I hate it, it's the fact that we always discredit it as it just doesn't count. Personally, I don't agree with that. I like the fact that we basically set the playing field, and you need to, as a team, you need to master that aspect of the game as well. So if there were more best of one games in tournaments, that you had to come in and you knew that you're NAVI, your Falcons, your Spirit, your Vitality for that matter as well, and you're going into a big tournament that you obviously want to win, well, you better prepare mentally that you're playing a best of one instead of always giving the same excuse that, first round, it's a bit randomized, we don't know, but we'll get it done in the lower bracket. It's already predetermined that you set up an excuse for yourself for losing the best of one. And if anything, I think it's a quality, right? As a team, if you are consistently beating your opponents in best of one, that then gets you into the best of 3 games that you then deserve or you earned the right to play, then I don't mind that whatsoever. And also in the historical context as well, just to bring it all back, we used to have best of ones all the time back in the day when I was playing. We even had randomized veto by Valve, that you do the veto and then they would pick the third map for you and then pick the map in a best of one for you. So in terms of where we develop with the formats and where we come, we're in a very good place. So stop moaning about best of ones, give me a bit more and then earn your right to play the best of 3s.
I'll respond.
Yeah,
I'm gonna keep moaning about BO1s. I look back at the stats of because the bounty had a lot of upsets
Online.
for the most recent opening round. It was half of the games had a lower ranked HLTV team beat a higher ranked one. But this was actually a huge anomaly that usually actually at the bounty there's been a lot of games going exactly as you expect them to. Sort of famously, maybe not so famous because of the reaction that I saw, but in round 1 of the fall 2025 bounty, opening round, so 32 teams, 16 matchups, 0 upsets. Reminder, all of these are BO3s. I compared the numbers of all of the bounties online results, which are all BO3s, versus the majors BO1 results. Majors at BO1 are more random. BO1s at majors are more random, like more upsets happen than the bounty BO3s. So in a way, I would rather have an online BO3 if I want the better team to make it through than I would rather have a LAN BO1 if I just want the best team to make it.
That's also a hot take.
Yeah, so I mean, it just gets the better teams more often than not. Like you could fall asleep on one online map or whatever, it happens, sure, but to lose a whole series, that doesn't happen nearly as often, I think, as people expect it to. I mean, so for the sake of just getting the best teams deeper in the tournament, yes, but I also I'll give it one piece of mind here that just I wouldn't mind a couple different formats. I feel like it's just too often now that we have the Swiss format, which I get for making your tournament competitive. Yes, like Swiss, all BO3s all the way through, it does lead to it, but it is a bit of a slog in a sense too. And I don't mind tournaments that are like the bounty, that are even sometimes like the beginning of the World Cup, where you have these sort of unlikelier results. And but the problem is I wouldn't want to have what is supposed to be a world championship or something that is supposed to be similar to a world championship of Counter-Strike run that. I want just a super competitive format. But I'm just saying I wouldn't blame a TO on any given tournament for let's just say PGL Bucharest is probably not going to have this. I assume it's just going to be BO3 Swiss all the way through until the playoffs, which will be an 8-team bracket. I wouldn't mind if PGLs just said first round BO1s. Like, I don't know why they would do it, but if they just want to make sure that teams play 2 BO1s so that you could then figure out you play 1 BO1 opener, but then your second game and on are all BO3s. It makes it so you have to play 2 series in a day. It eliminates a day of the broadcast. It makes things cheaper. It's cynical. I don't want them to do this because I think that it would slightly lower the quality of the results, but I also wouldn't put it past them for just kind of logistical reasons.
All right.
So you agree?
The clock.
No, I don't agree.
Right, what I will say is this. I definitely don't agree, because here's what's weird. It's the way you framed it. Like, if you'd have just said, I want BO1s, because, like, first of all, like, back in the day, we had to do that. It's like a grind, There's, like, an element where you have to be more prepared. But the problem is, when you said, like, you have to earn your way through, by definition, the underdogs are not earning their way. They're just winning randy BO1s at the beginning of tournaments. Like, they're not actually having to earn it whatsoever. In fact, I would say earning it is winning the best of 3 against the team in the opener on the LAN match. By the way, you have a million fucking days to prepare for that match. You're playing. How about you prepare to fucking win the game against Vitality instead of going, I hope on MR12. Also, by the way, we've got fucking MR12, bro. Like, MR12, there wasn't even MR12 back in your day. It was MR15. I wish you could go back in a time machine and play some of those. I wish you could travel to a fucking dog shit Eastern European country and play an MR12 opening BO1 and fuck it, let's just have only a BO1 Pimp. Let's earn our way in the tournament. And then you get knocked out by some randy fucking, the equivalent of K27, who only magically perform in the cyber arena in Kiev. And then you have to go all the way back home and go, fucking hell, when's this going to become like a real sport and get best of 3s, aka what Thorin will say in 10 years. So I wish that would happen to you. And then also, If you ever just go and look, the reason why I don't like it is because obviously when you have these BO1s, it then fucks up later on brackets and group stages, and that tends to make the parts of the tournament I care about the most have the biggest impact. If there was a way, there probably is, I just haven't figured it out. If there was a way to design a group stage format where the BO1 can exist, but it doesn't like it overpower the rest of the tournament, I'd be up for it. It's why I'm not against the idea of removing pistol rounds. I also think pistol rounds do the same thing. They fuck up the rest of the game, which is the real gun rounds that I want to see, and they're kind of a bit randy. So if people want an example, I'll actually use the tennis example. In tennis, all the Grand Slams, all of the matches are 5 sets, if people don't know. And all you need to do is if you ever go and look when there's dominant players, Sinner and Alcaraz now, Djokovic, Federer, Nadal, like 10 years ago or whatever. If you ever go and look, the dominant players just farm the Grand Slams because they can't be beaten in that format. But if you ever go and look at either the ATP Finals event at the end of the year or the ATP 1000 Masters, those tournaments have a 3-set final, and they are won way more. I'm going to say like 10 times more by the underdog. Like there are so many times that players have won Masters or even the finals of the ATP who've never won a Grand Slam and have only been in like, a final and lost, not even in good fashion. And then lastly, also, like I brought up, as well as it being MR12, which I think is just way too randy, MR12 plus some of the maps we have, bro, if you get like a Mirage or a Dust 2, it doesn't even matter when you win the pistol. Sometimes someone just does like a bullshit Mac 10 buy and just wins it against you. And that isn't like, you haven't practiced the game and studied it. They just ran by you and jumped, and Huxley pressed the left mouse button and the god said, okay, today a headshot happens. Like, that's no counterplay against that. Like, and if that can then suddenly put you like CT economy completely behind, even though you won the pit, I think that's fucking sucks. And so unfortunately for me, that's not high level Counter-Strike. It's a type of Counter-Strike, but if anything, I would prefer, if you want a hot take, just have a tournament that's BO1 if you want that. How about that? Have a BO1 championship where you just play BO1s against everyone, even in the playoffs, even in the final, make it super fucking cool and really exciting. But I tell you what, you'll get really bored of that when you watch it, Mick, and you won't wait, you'll be gagging for the tournament I like with all BO3s and BO5. Okay, we can do some like back and forth here. Like, if we want some back and forth, let's do it.
Listen, I don't disagree. My hot take is that I don't necessarily want to see less best of one, and I wouldn't mind if we see a bit more. Because one thing Maui said that I very much do agree with.
Why do you hear people whining though? I still don't get that part. I get that. Look, I get that people complaining. It's annoying. That's understandable. But why does it bother you that people complain about BO1?
Because I think it takes away the legitimacy of a win and a best of one. As you said, like it's everyone is just discrediting it as it didn't happen. If the favorite win, then sure, the favorite were better. Good job on you. And if the favorite lose, then the underdog didn't really win. So it's a lose-lose scenario. So I think like either you count the game or you treat them the same or you don't, which that's my issue with why people are complaining or whining about it. Now, let me just state it, I also agree that a best of 3 game is better than a best of 1. But as Maui said, and which I very much agree with, take PGL as an example, it does get drawn out a lot, when you have teams that is, let's say you have a tournament where you have, 6 out of the top 10 teams, and then you have 10, teams where half of them are top 32 or something like that. To watch them play best of 3s against each other in the in the 00 game, in the 02 game, or in the 01 game. Like it's the quality of Counter-Strike that we get from some of these teams that are ranked number 25 to 40 and playing in a best of 3 against each other. You may not want to say it out loud, but often I'm thinking like that could have been a best of 1 game. Like fuck it. Why do we have to watch? Why do we have to watch 3 maps of this shit? That could have.
I'll give you an example off the top of my head. I can't remember if it was the Astralis Pain game at Bowie. There was some game that like I died when it went to a third map. Mate. It was the worst CS.
Something like that.
You know what I mean? Like it was like negative experience to watch.
That's the thing. Like it was a negative experience to watch.
The thing is, Thorin, you were at home watching a lot of that, and you were like BO3s, BO5s all the time. But now that you're going back to events and you're forced to sit there in the chair and to actually watch everything that's put in front of you, you're like, eat the slop, and you're like, I don't want it. And at home, you can just turn it off at home. But when you're on the co-streams, when you're working the event,
True.
That's why I like the major format. I like the fact that in stage 1 and stage 2, we still have best of 1s. And then if you earn your way into stage 3, where all the best teams are at, then you get to play best of 3s. So my point is that, I think the general notion from the public, and I guess from a lot of you guys as well, at least when I speak to my colleagues, is that remove best of 1s at all costs. We don't want them whatsoever. I don't want them removed, I just want them to use where they make sense, and to be completely honest, part of it is also the cost added, as you said, as a TO perspective, if that means that we have a better playoff, or if we have 8 teams in the playoff instead of 6 teams in the playoff, if there's a trade-off that we have best of one that then enables later on in the tournament that we have more quality, then I'm also open up for it. And I think that's some of the nuances you have to say.
I will just say in the last little bit of time left, the downside of what you've done here, listen, welcome to Hot Take Point Made. This is how we do it. You've actually undercut your whole fucking point about Vitality, because by that logic, Vitality didn't earn all those championships, did they? Astralis was playing the BO1s. They were earning their way to the part of the tournament. Vitality played in an era where there was barely any BO1s, so when there was a BO1, they lost it. Therefore, they're not the greatest team ever. I don't agree with anything I just said right now. It's all the fuck with Pimp. But if Pimp's undercut his whole point from earlier on, that minus 10 from Gryffindor, like whatever, that's
because best of ones, that's where you're wrong. Best of ones are not random. You know, Maui's example with best of ones as well. Just to context, just to downplay that argument before we move on. You know, you compared Blast. Was it Blast Bounty? You know, where the seeding format is that they one play 16, right? So naturally, there's not going to be
each other. They could pick each
exactly,
other.
And most of the time, the best team is going to pick the worst team, or the worst team is going to pick like usually. Whereas at the majors, where the best of ones are random, you know, it's 1 against 9, which people also do complain about. So naturally, the games are closer. You know, naturally, a lot of the best of ones games are super close between who is the higher seed and lower seed. It's not 1 against 16; it's 1 against 9, 2 against 10, etc., etc. So deeper down you go, the closer it gets. Also, we just had EWC, and the only big surprise we had in the best of one games were GTR beating Spirit. Apart from that, all the favorite one, you know, more or less. So is it random? Is the best of one random? Does it count or does it not count? That's my whole issue, right? I hate the fact that we even have the discussion whether or not a game counts just because of the format. Of course it does.
Obviously, we're still getting used to it. We're still figuring out. We're still even figuring out the timer thing. By the way, I might even tweak that. If I think it's too long or too short, I'll figure out how we're going to do it. I just want it to be generally that we can move through the show in an orderly manner. But also, you have to realise, you have to get them out of reps. It's like when you work on the desk. When people come on the desk, oftentimes they speak too much or they don't know how to interact with other people. You learn the beats of where there's time to speak, how much time you've got, how to pick your point into that, how to segment it, which parts, by the way, not to waste your time arguing about. Don't worry, on counterpoints, I'll let Pimp go completely crazy. We'll cut him off if he starts rambling too much or circles around a point too. It's all good. We'll do all that. So this is, if you're just a random Joe out there, a fucking peon, a mere pleb, probably someone who's, you know, actually, I would have said is a fan of ZywOo, but I've glazed him half the episode, so that doesn't even work, whatever. And a traditional ZywOo fan, then the episode ends for you here. Hope you enjoyed the new show. If you are a subscriber, and if you do, why not pick Hot Take Point Made so we can get some of the money, then you will see an exclusive Q&A, 15, 20 minutes. That'll be coming immediately after this.